My YouTube channel, Natty the Coder. Today we're going to be talking about function expressions. So far we have talked about functions and all that, and now we're going to be talking about function expressions. What is a function expression? How do we use it? Before diving into the lecture, please make sure that you watch the previous lectures in JavaScript in order to follow along the tutorial. Yeah, let's just jump into the lecture. Function expressions. In JavaScript, a function expression is not a magical language structure, but a special kind of value. The syntax that we used before is called function declaration. So to declare a function in the previous lecture that we just saw that we declare a function in a specific way. We have a function keyword and followed by a function name and parentheses and then the body of the function. That syntax is called function declaration. There's another syntax for creating a function in JavaScript that is called function expression. It allows us to create a new function in the middle of an expression. Example is let's greeting and for example there's a function name now and we pass it a function with a function keyword, but we don't specify the function name over here, and with a pair of parentheses as we defined the function and the body of the function. As the function creation happens in the context of the assignment expression to the right side of equal, this is called function expression. Since the function declaration is happening on the assignment, it is basically the right side of this variable on the right side, and then we assign it to the variable. So this is why it's called function expression. Function is basically a value. No matter how the function is created, a function is always a value. We can even print out that value as string representation, which is the source code of that function. For example, let's just take an example and see what it looked like. I'll just take out the whole code and the old one basically. And let's say we have a variable, say hello world. So we had this previous way of declaring a function like this. For example, we just replace it with, for example, this, and we can declare we were declaring the function like this. This is called function declaration. But the newer way to declare a function is this. We have to define, use the let keyword and then the hello world, the name of the function, and then we assign it a function, which is basically the function just like this, but without the function name, but the parentheses and then the body of the function. So this is what we call function expression. Yeah. We can print out the value as a string represented, which is the source code of the function. So we were talking about that a function is basically a value. It's a special value. For example, we have some code over here. We have, for example, just a code like this. We'll just comment it out for now. To print this function, we can just do console log and print the value of this function. You can see this. When we save it and refresh, you can see the body of the function, which is the script of the code of the function actually. So it says it is a function, it is a function and it is this body. So this is how we know that basically a function is basically a value. Surely a function is special value, that's for true, in the sense that we can call it. Example is this. For example, we just talked about that function is a value, but it's a special kind of value that we can even call this. How do we call this function expression now? So we'll get rid of the console log message over here, and we can just call it as we used to call this function. We just have to add pair of parentheses in front of the name of the function, or the value or the variable that is assigned to, and we can call it like this. So you can see that now we have the hello world message, which basically is calling this function, and we have a print message or console log message over here in the body of this hello world, and we can just call it like that. So yeah, so this is how the function expression works. Callback functions. What are callback functions? Let's talk about callbacks. Passing functions as values using function expression. In practice, such functions are quite useful. The passed function as a parameter is called the callback functions, or just callbacks. So we can also pass a function as a parameter to another function. For example, we have another function, let's say name, Okay, and we have we have to call it, for example, and it just prints out this, let's say, okay, console log Jackson 10t. Okay, we're just printing this name in this function. So how we can call pass this function to this function? So basically, normally we do we accept parameters over here. Okay, we can call it, for example, name. This parameter could be anything. This could be a string, this could be a number, this could be a boolean value, and this could even be a callback function. So how we can call this function now? So for example, if I want to pass this function to this one, this name function, to the hello world function, I can simply do this. Okay, this function is passed to this hello world function, and in order to call this function, we can just do name, and then followed just we do just as we call another function, we can just add the parentheses, and this will call the name function over here. When we save it and refresh the page, you can see hello world and Jackson Denty. We are not calling the function outside of it, but inside we're calling it. So this is how we can pass the functions, and the passed functions to another function, they're called callbacks. So it's certain. It's in some places you would know. For example, you have a use case that you want to call this function, for example, this parent function, and you do some executions, calculations, or whatever, some operations, and after those executions, you want to call a function. Then you can just pass that function as a parameter, and this will be called, this function will be called. So this is why we call it callback function. The idea is that we pass a function and expect it to be called back. So this is why, later if necessary. So this is why it's called callback. So we expect the function that we are passing this callback to, so it should be called back. That's why we call it callback function. Function expression versus function declaration. We talked about function expression, and we talked about function declaration as well. Let's see what is the difference now. They have a different syntax, that's for sure. First, where we saw that we just start with the function keyword and then followed by the function name and then parenthesis and then a body. But in first and the function expression is basically different. We assign it to basically a variable. A functional expression is created when the execution reaches it, and it is usable only from that moment. So basically, and the syntax, they're different. Basically, you can see the syntax, it is different. But also, when the execution reaches this point, then this function is created. And until that, this function is not there, and you cannot call it until that statement is exactly executed. Once the execution flow passes to the right side of the assignment, the function is created and can be used. A function declaration can be called earlier than it is defined. Okay, so that is basically the difference. So in the expression, it's called the function would be callable once the execution reaches that line, but in function declaration, that can be called earlier than it is defined. For example, a global function declaration is visible in the whole script no matter where it is. That's due to the internal algorithm. When JavaScript prepares to run the script, it first looks for global function declarations in it and creates the functions. We can think of it as an initialization stage. So during the initialization stage, the function declarations are created, the functions are created, and then they can be accessible from anywhere. Example is say hi, function say hi, and sometimes that. So it would work. For example, if you call a function first and then initialize it with this keyword, now for example with the declaration, then it will work. So for example, we have a function over here. Let's just get rid of this. For example, we have a function called name. For example, this is a function. It is called name. So this is just in the case of declaration, function declaration, and not in the function expressions. We cannot do with that. Once what happens if I call it? So it's called before its declaration. So yeah. So once the JavaScript executes this file, then it first creates the functions, all of the functions. So basically they are global functions, and we can execute it from anywhere we want. So even before its declaration. So you can see that it returns a Jackson Dante. So this is basically the core difference between the function expressions and function declaration. So yeah, I hope that you have learned something new from this lecture. We have talked about functions declaration and one functions expression, and how a function is a value, how we can define what is the difference between these two declaration syntaxes of functions. Please like and share the video, subscribe to the channel, and make sure to press the bell icon for the future updates. And until then, I'll see you in the next lecture.